right, so get ready because we're going deep on this one.
Oh, yeah.
This is a case that is disturbing
Absolutely.
and fascinating.
100%.
And it all revolves around this murder plot that seems like it was just taken straight from Dexter.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, how much can fiction actually influence reality?
Well, that's what we're going to try to find out today.
Right.
So, Cory Martin
Yeah.
from Queens, New York,
Mm.
he's serving a life sentence right now for the murder and dismemberment of a 26-year-old woman, Brandy Odom.
Tragic.
Um,
Really is.
But what makes this case so bizarre is how Martin used his, I guess you could say his Dexter knowledge to try and get away with it.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just watching this show for fun, right?
Yeah.
It's like he used Dexter as a how-to manual
Exactly.
for murder
Yeah.
and body disposal.
So to get to the bottom of this, we're going to be using court documents, news articles, press releases, all that good stuff.
Got to get all the facts.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are so many questions to answer. Like, why would he even choose to emulate Dexter? Like, what was going on in his head?
What and how did Brandy Odom, this young woman with dreams of a better life, get caught up in this horrific situation in the first place?
Exactly.
So Brandy, she wanted to be a school security guard.
She did, yeah, and she was working on getting her own apartment.
Right, trying to make a good life for herself.
Right.
It's just awful how it all ended.
It is, yeah, and tragically, she became a victim of sex trafficking, caught in this web of exploitation that Cory Martin was running.
Yeah, she was living under his control in a house in Rosedale, Queens.
With another woman, Adele Anderson.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they were both being trafficked by Martin.
Forced into commercial sex work.
Subjected to some pretty horrifying abuse, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where the story takes this really dark turn. Martin, along with Anderson, they come up with this plan to take out life insurance policies on Brandy
Yeah.
and then murder her to collect the benefits.
I mean,
And yeah, and this is where the Dexter connection becomes even more disturbing because not only did he draw inspiration from the show for the murder,
right.
but he also seemed to use it as a guide for how to cover up his tracks.
Like he thought he was Dexter or something.
Yeah, and Anderson's testimony is the one that really kind of lays this all out.
Right.
Because she said that Martin would watch Dexter
Oh, yeah.
religiously. And there's another show called The First 48.
Oh, wow. So like a real crime show, too.
Yes, and The First 48 follows homicide detectives during the first 48 hours of an investigation.
Oh, I see. So he was trying to learn how to dispose of a body and how to avoid getting caught all at the same time.
Yeah, he was getting tips from both sides,
Right.
like the killer and the investigator.
It's scary how calculated that is.
It really is.
So what did he do? I mean, how does this all play out?
Well, he strangled Brandy
Oh, God.
in her bedroom,
Oh, horrible.
and then he dismembered her body in the bathtub.
Oh, my God.
And he
I
even
can't believe it.
Yeah, and he even covered the bathroom with black garbage bags,
Like they do on Dexter.
just like Dexter did on the show. Yeah.
It's like he was following a script or something.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Did I remember that detail about the tools he researched online?
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
It wasn't just any saw. It was the exact same model that they use in Dexter.
It was a DeWalt 12-amp corded reciprocating saw.
It's like, was he so obsessed with this fantasy that he thought using the same tools would somehow guarantee the same outcome?
That's a good question.
It really makes you wonder what was going on in his head.
Absolutely. So after that, he disposed of Brandy's body parts in Canarsie Park.
Then what?
And then, this is where it gets even weirder, he started obsessively following the news coverage.
No way.
Yeah.
Like he wanted to see how people were reacting to it.
Almost like he was relishing the attention the case was getting.
That's so creepy.
It's very creepy. Like, was he seeking notoriety? Did he see himself as some kind of real-life Dexter playing out this gruesome fantasy on a public stage?
Or was it even darker than that?
Uh-huh.
Like he needed to see his actions reflected in the media to feel like he'd actually achieved something.
Yeah.
It's disturbing either way.
Absolutely.
So how did they catch him?
Well, for as meticulously as he thought he was covering his tracks, his reliance on this fictional character ultimately failed him.
Justice prevailed.
Yeah, law enforcement was able to piece together the evidence, and he was eventually arrested.
Okay, good.
But Martin's capture doesn't really answer all the questions.
Yeah, I mean, this whole case raises so many questions about the impact of violent media.
Right.
Could it be that for someone like Martin, who was already prone to violence and criminal behavior, exposure to these graphic depictions just provided a blueprint? like a roadmap for how to act out his darkest impulses.
I mean, it's definitely a disturbing thought, one that we have to consider.
Yeah.
This case is really a stark reminder that the line between fiction and reality can be dangerously thin.
100%.
And we really need to delve deeper into this, I think,
Yeah.
to understand how Martin's obsession with Dexter intersected with his real-life crimes.
We have to.
And we also need to explore the tragic story of Brandy Odom,
Of course.
this young woman whose life was cut short
Yeah.
and whose dreams were stolen by a man who saw her as nothing more than a pawn in his own twisted game.
That's exactly what she was to him. Just a pawn.
So stick with us.
Yeah, don't go anywhere.
As we continue our deep dive into the Dexter killer case, it's easy to get caught up in the gruesome details of a case like this.
Right.
But we can't forget that at the heart of it all,
Mm.
there was a real person
Yeah.
whose life was tragically cut short.
Brandy Odom was more than just a name in a court document, you know. She was a young woman who had hopes and dreams just like anyone else.
She did, yeah, and she wanted to make a better life for herself.
Absolutely.
And from everything we've read, in the court documents, the news reports, it seems like she had this really strong desire to protect others.
That's right. I mean, her aspiration to become a school security guard really says a lot about her character.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if that protective instinct of hers played a part in how she got involved with Martin in the first place.
Yeah, like, did she see a chance to help other women who were caught in the same situation? Or was she just trying to survive in a world that didn't offer her many options?
Right.
It's hard to say for sure.
It is, yeah. And we may never know the answers to those questions.
Unfortunately.
But it's important that we acknowledge Brandy's humanity, her
Right.
individuality in this case, that so often just focuses on the perpetrator.
100% we can't forget about her.
No, we can't.
And that brings us back to the unsettling role that Dexter played in this whole tragedy, right?
Yeah.
It's not just that he was inspired by the show. It's the specific details he fixated on that are so chilling.
Yeah, like that DeWalt saw.
Yeah.
What do you think was going through his mind when he chose to focus on that particular tool?
Well, I think it shows a real desire for control,
Okay.
a need to orchestrate the crime in a way that mirrored his own twisted fantasy.
Right.
And remember, Dexter, the character, is all about control, right?
Yeah, it is.
He sets the rules, he chooses his victims, he even has a code he lives by.
Right, right. So Martin, in his mind, wasn't just committing a crime. He
Yeah.
was playing a role.
Exactly.
He was following a script that was written by someone else.
a fictional character.
Yeah,
That's wild.
it is wild. And it's like he was trying to step into the TV screen to become Dexter.
Yeah, to have that same power and control over life and death.
Right, and that's where things get really disturbing.
I know.
Because he wasn't content with just committing the crime.
Right.
He wanted to see it reflected back at him.
Yeah, to experience it through the lens of the media.
Yes, and that's why he was obsessively following all the news coverage.
It's creepy how he was so fascinated with the public's reaction to finding Brandy's remains.
It is, and it seems like he was looking for validation, like some kind of twisted recognition for his, his Dexter-like performance.
It's like he needed that external validation to justify what he had done.
Yeah, it's all very disturbing.
It really is, and this whole thing forces us to confront the potential dangers of media influence, especially when it comes to violent content.
It does.
Because we often think of entertainment as harmless, but for someone like Martin, who's clearly already unstable, could seeing these graphic depictions have pushed him over the edge?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that's been debated for years.
It has.
This whole idea of whether watching violence on screen can lead to violence in real life.
Right, and the research is complicated.
It is.
There's not really a clear answer.
No.
But this case definitely highlights the need for critical thinking,
Yeah.
for media literacy.
Yeah.
We have to be able to engage with this type of content in a way that allows us to see it for what it is, fiction, entertainment, and not let it blur the lines with reality.
And that brings us to the accomplice in all of this, Adele Anderson.
Right. She played a key role in this whole scheme, taking out the life insurance policies, helping dispose of the body.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Anderson was also a victim of Martin's trafficking.
She was, yeah. She was trapped in a terrible situation with very few options.
Living under his control, subject to his abuse.
Exactly. And her testimony paints a really horrifying picture of the physical and emotional abuse she endured.
It does, yeah. The threats, the manipulation, it's clear she was operating under duress.
Oh, absolutely. She was
Yeah.
caught in this cycle of violence that must have felt impossible to escape.
And yet,
Right.
she eventually chose to cooperate with law enforcement.
She did.
And her testimony was crucial in securing Martin's conviction.
It was, yeah.
It's like a complex situation, right?
It is.
And it highlights the challenges of holding people accountable in cases where there are multiple layers of victimization and coercion involved.
Because it's not always as simple as good versus evil.
Right.
There are often shades of gray, and it's crucial to understand the full context of each person's involvement.
It seems like Anderson was walking a tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to survive in a dangerous situation while also looking for a way out.
She was trying to find a way to escape that nightmare.
And by cooperating with the authorities, she helped bring justice for Brandy.
She did, yeah.
And hopefully that paved the way for her own healing and recovery.
I hope so, too.
Now let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the role of life insurance in this whole thing.
Okay.
It's not just a backdrop.
It's not.
It's a really crucial element of Martin's plan.
Yeah, it's a disturbing example of how something that's meant for good,
Right.
like financial protection, can be twisted and manipulated for criminal gain.
It really is. And the fact that he saw Brandy's life as nothing more than a dollar amount, a means to an end, it's just chilling.
It really is. And it raises questions about the ethical responsibilities of the insurance industry.
It does, yeah.
Like, are there safeguards in place to prevent these kinds of schemes? How can we protect vulnerable people from being exploited like this?
These are important questions, ones that we need to explore further.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also crucial to examine the larger societal implications of this case.
Oh, for sure. This case is about so much more than just one man's obsession with a TV show.
It is, yeah.
It's about the dangers of sex trafficking, the potential for media to influence behavior, and the urgent need to protect vulnerable populations from exploitation and abuse.
It's a wake-up call.
It is.
A reminder that these issues are real.
They are.
They're happening in our community.
And we all have a role to play in addressing them.
We do,
We
yeah.
need to be aware, we need to be informed, and we need to be willing to speak up and take action when we see something wrong.
So if we do see something, what can we do? Who can we contact?
Well, there are tons of organizations out there dedicated to fighting trafficking and supporting survivors.
Okay.
The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a great resource.
Okay.
And you can also reach out to local law enforcement agencies or advocacy groups.
It's important to remember that even one person speaking up can make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. One voice can spark a movement.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to pause for a second
Okay.
and pose a question to you, the listener.
Right.
Knowing that Martin was so obsessed with Dexter, a show that focused on a serial killer who targets other criminals, do you think he saw himself as a vigilante of sorts? Like, was he trying to dispense his own twisted form of justice?
That's a great question.
Was that part of his motivation?
We'll be back in a moment to explore that question and delve into the even larger implications of this case.
So we left off with a pretty big question.
Yeah.
Did Cory Martin see himself as some kind of vigilante?
Right, taking inspiration from Dexter to deliver his own twisted form of justice.
It's a disturbing thought.
It is. It really makes you think about how easily the line between fantasy and reality can get blurred.
Especially in a world where we're constantly surrounded by violent media.
Exactly. But I think it's important to remember that even if Martin did see himself that way, his actions were ultimately driven by something far more sinister.
Yeah.
A need for power and control.
And that need for control played out in every aspect of his life.
Well, absolutely. From the way he exploited and abused those women
Right.
to how meticulously he planned Brandy's murder.
It's like he was obsessed with Dexter, not just to learn how to commit the crime, but to replicate that feeling of mastery.
Right, like Dexter's ability to manipulate and outsmart everyone around him.
It's almost as if he was trying to prove something, not just to the world, but to himself.
Yeah, like by perfectly copying Dexter's actions, he could somehow validate his own twisted worldview.
And that desire for validation, that need to see his actions reflected back at him, is what ultimately led to his downfall.
Oh, 100%. I mean, think about it.
I am, yeah.
His obsession with the news coverage, his fascination with how the public was reacting to the case, it all points to this deep psychological need.
Right, it wasn't just about getting away with murder.
No, it was much deeper than that.
So what can we learn from all of this? What are the takeaways, especially for those of us who enjoy these kinds of shows?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is media literacy.
Okay.
We need to be able to look at the media we consume with a critical eye.
Yeah.
Separate fact from fiction. understand how violent content can potentially affect people,
Right.
and most importantly, recognize that our choices, our actions, they have real-world consequences.
It's not about censoring or banning certain types of shows or movies. It's about being thoughtful about what we watch.
Exactly.
Understanding the context.
And recognizing its limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also can't forget about the dangers of exploitation and abuse.
Oh, of course not. Brandy's story is a heartbreaking reminder that these things are happening all around us, often hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, and it can be hard to know what to do
They do.
if we think something's wrong.
But there are things we can do.
Like what?
Well, we need to educate ourselves about the signs of trafficking and abuse.
Right.
And if we suspect something, we need to speak up.
So who do we contact if we see something?
There are so many great organizations dedicated to fighting trafficking and supporting survivors.
Okay.
The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a really good resource.
Okay.
And you can always reach out to local law enforcement or advocacy groups.
It's important to remember that even just one person speaking up can make a real difference.
Absolutely. Never underestimate the power of your voice.
This case has really taken us on a journey
It has.
into the darkest parts of human nature.
It's been a wild ride.
But it's also shown us the importance of awareness, critical thinking, and compassion.
We can't just ignore the tough realities of the world,
No, we can't.
but we can choose to confront them in a way that promotes understanding,
Yeah.
empathy, and hopefully leads to positive change.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Dexter killer case.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope this has sparked some important conversations.
And we encourage you to continue learning about these critical issues.
Take care.